And another thing, you're always squawking about something. If it isn't the steak, it's something else.
I didn't squawk about the steak there. I merely said I didn't see that old horse that used to be tethered outside here.
You're as funny as a cry for help.
In 1941, just 5 years before his passing, W.C. Fields would take to the screen for what would be his final starring role in Never Give a Sucker an Even Break, a headfirst dive into the audacious and surreal, a cinematic oddity irreverently lampooning the inner workings of Hollywood through the dryly brazen and unconventional antics of W.C. Fields. It's a bizarre creation worthy of equal bewilderment and admiration.
I'm just a man.
Man? I never heard that word before.
You didn't?
Are you really a man?
Well, I've been called other things.
Over the previous decades, Fields had meticulously cultivated a distinctive persona and filmography, centered around a steady and specific kind of shtick. His act was a laid-back veneration of chaos, where convention was more or less a bother, and where politeness could be the greatest vessel for disrespect. Fields would comedically present this worldview through a drunken drawl and jolly demeanor.
Mary, you're okay. I voted for you last election 5 times.
To label him a comedic genius may seem hyperbole, but it is a descriptor deservedly earned. His humor showcased a profound originality and a commitment to push the boundaries, all with an effortlessly indifferent execution. W.C. Fields fluently merged the spectrums of sharp verbal wit with graceful and articulate physical comedy. A sardonic everyman with a penchant for libations and leisure, and a baffling magnetism for everyone else's ignorance and incivility.
I have an appointment with Mr. Skinner, president of the bank.
You step to one side, please.
Yes, thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Miss Carroll.
I had an appointment with Mr. Skinner, the...
Please, just to one side.
Oh.
So, there you are.
The president,
Please, will you step to one side? Just a moment.
Nice weather we're having.
Yes, it is.
Yes, clever observation.
How have you been, Mr. Petty?
Fine, thank you.
That's good. It's very interesting.
There's something oddly relatable to Fields' lovable crank persona, an equal receiver and distributor of disorder, who did and said what many of us would if not for the basic constraints of society. Naturally, given his fondness for edginess, his career was marred with the meddling of Hollywood executives, much to his frustration and resistance. But by 1941, he had managed to wear them down and never give a sucker an even break, with the Universal Pictures giving Fields a green light, the keys to the car, and the seeming creative control he had always craved. He would have power over the story, the setting, the cast, and more. Or so he thought.
It's impossible, inconceivable, incomprehensible. And besides that, it's no good. And as for the continuity, it's terrible.
Throughout the production, there was a palpable sense that he had grown greatly disenchanted with the industry and vice versa. The comedian was aging, considered past his prime, and a lifetime of alcoholism was proving him increasingly unreliable. Compounded by personal troubles behind the scenes, the film effectively became his swan song, and W.C. Fields was determined to make a memorable exit. In Never Give a Sucker an Even Break, W.C. Fields plays the system and himself in what is undeniably a meandering masterstroke from one of classic Hollywood's most distinctive entertainers.
I'm trouble with insomnia.
Oh, insomnia. Well, I know a good cure for it.
Yeah?
Get plenty of sleep.
Sleep.
That's what the doctor told me.
Born William Claude Dukenfield in 1880, Fields spent his youth on the outskirts of Philadelphia. As the son of an English immigrant, he would work the family's produce cart. Amidst the boredom that surely accompanied this, Fields, using the fruit and vegetables of the cart, discovered a remarkable talent for juggling. Recognizing an opportunity to make this talent a career, Fields would venture into the world of vaudeville, where he would shorten his name to W.C. Fields and step into the spotlight as the eccentric juggler. Not only was he celebrated for his impressive juggling abilities, but also for the cleverly sarcastic humor he seamlessly integrated into his acts. Through mumbling quips and intentional fumbles, Fields kept his audience doubly engaged. Throughout the early 1900s, Fields would tour internationally and would become rapidly regarded as the world's greatest juggler. By 1905, Fields would take the stage on Broadway, participating in a handful of musical comedies, and would notably spend several years as a member of the Ziegfeld Follies. Not long after, Fields would transition to the silent screen, where he further honed the humorously cantankerous style that would become his trademark. These films highlighted his comedic timing and physical prowess, yet notably, the medium was forced to neglect one of his most valuable attributes: his voice. With the acceptance of sound features looming on the horizon, it was certain this technical shift would prove ever beneficial to his unrivaled brand of comedy.
Now stand clear, boy. Don't stand there. Don't you know I'll smite you in the sconce with this truncheon? You're standing right and go boom away.
Fields' entrance into sound pictures would be significantly marked by a handful of collaborations with Paramount Pictures and the renowned comedy filmmaker Mack Sennett. These films gave W.C. Fields a voice and further showcased his hokey humor to the world, endearing him to an even wider audience.
And it ain't a pick night out, a man or
Fields' foray into feature-length sound films came shortly after, and throughout the 1930s he would make substantial contributions to dozens of productions, many of which are today considered comedy classics. Initially cast in supporting roles, producers quickly found he could carry films on his own. W.C. Fields harnessed the power of sound and dialogue to his full advantage. Not only was he a master of repartee and witty wisecracks,
Squawk Mulligan tells me you buried your wife several years ago.
Oh, yes, I had to. She died.
he also had a deep love of language and the auditory quality of words, and he artfully wielded his melodious vocabulary often, always to humorous effect.
Charlie was a very insulting fellow. He referred to my proboscis as an adventitious excretions. I had to tweak his nose.
The extended length of feature films also provided Fields with more room to play. While he was a master of the one-liner, he was also adept at the tedious slow burn, prudently stretching a bit to its ultimate maximum. A memorable example can be found in a nearly 20-minute long sequence from It's a Gift, as Fields struggles to get some sleep, but is incessantly kept awake by an assortment of disruptions courtesy of his careless family and neighbors.
Hurry up now.
I'll hurry.
Don't forget the ipecac.
I thought you said syrup a squill.
I can't hear you. Talk louder.
I thought you said syrup a squill.
All right, syrup of squills. I don't care.
I don't care either. I'll get ipecac if you want me to.
Well, ipecac or syrup of squills. I don't care which.
I don't care either. You tell me what to get and I'll get it.
Get whichever one you want. I don't care. Whatever they have handy. It's just the same to me.
Well, it's just the same to me, too. I hate them both. Oh, where'll I go? To Jones's?
Use your own judgment.
No, you tell me where to go.
I'd like to tell you both where to go.
There's no use, dear. I can't hear a word you're saying. Somebody's shouting on the floor below, so you better
it's
run
me.
along.
His character often fell into one of two molds, the scheming con artist or the meek and browbeaten family man. As was typical in Fields' films, the format would borrow the structure of a Marx Brothers movie. Plots are minimal and generally secondary, primarily serving as loose links between varying comedy vignettes.
Myers Twilly, Cuthbert J. Twilly, one of the old Back Bay Twillies. Thank you. I'm glad to know you, too.
Fields' filmic presence would become highly sought after. He was a great comedian, but also displayed versatility as an actor.
It's Humpty Dumpty.
Don't stand there staring at me as if I were an egg,
Why do you sit out here all alone?
because there's nobody with me.
In 1935, he showcased his ability in his portrayal of Mr. Micawber in George Cukor's adaptation of David Copperfield.
I have thwarted the malevolent machinations of our scurrilous enemies. In short, I have arrived.
He was additionally one of the original choices to play the Wizard in The Wizard of Oz, as well as the role of Uncle Billy in It's a Wonderful Life. Overall, though, Fields would show a preference for leading roles in comedy.
Now, you keep your hands off my lunch, will you?
As his on-screen presence suggests, it was widely known that W.C. Fields had a strong affinity for alcohol and became somewhat infamous for filming most of his scenes in some state of inebriation, which frequently led to delays and frustrations for production.
Joke's on me, Sam. Wrong jug.
Try some of this new blended stuff.
It's a funny old world. Man's lucky if he gets out of it alive.
Further aggravated by a series of personal tragedies and health issues in his own life, Fields grew increasingly assertive on set, strongly clashing with producers, directors, and executives. These escalating tensions ultimately resulted in his termination from Paramount in 1937, prompting a hiatus from filmmaking.
Oh, excuse me.
That's all right. I hadn't any right standing in front of the hole.
In his absence from the movies, Fields would find popularity on the less demanding medium of radio, frequently featuring on the Chase and Sanborn Hour for collaborations with ventriloquist Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy.
You know, I've always been very fond of our feathered friend.
Bill, you have quite a collection, haven't you?
Yes, I have. And I always have a very rare Australian duck-billed platypus.
How small is this bird? Do you have to have glasses to see it?
Yes, about 3 or 4.
This renewed enthusiasm led Universal Studios to offer Fields a 4-movie contract that would begin with You Can't Cheat an Honest Man, also starring Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy in an attempt to recreate their radio magic for the screen. However, Fields once again found himself at odds with accredited director George Marshall. Upon Fields' insistence, director Edward F. Klein was hired to oversee his particular scenes. Eddie Klein shared a semi-similar background as W.C. Fields, both beginning their film careers working with Max Sennett as actors and screenwriters. Klein had earned the most recognition directing for and frequently appearing alongside silent film star Buster Keaton. Klein had previously worked with Fields on one of his first feature films, $1 Million Legs, in 1932, and Fields had recalled it as an enjoyable experience. Klein had a deeper understanding of Fields' makings and was more attuned to his vaudevillian sensibilities, recognizing he could be his funniest if given a bit more freedom to ad-lib. Klein would be W.C. Fields' director going forward, directing him in his next films, My Little Chickadee and The Bank Dick, both of which achieved box office and critical success. Observing the response of these films, Universal would reluctantly grant Fields with a greater measure of creative control for his last picture under their contract. Fields drafted the story under the pseudonym Otis Criblecoblis, a practice he had employed in previous films, credited in many of them as Charles Bogle, and in The Bank Dick as Mahatma Cain Jeeves. Fields initially presented a draft titled The Great Man that was just 12 pages long. This manuscript outlined an extremely loose idea about Fields selling a screenplay to a fictional movie studio. Universal rejected this as too short. After another round of back and forth, Fields would enlist the service of 2 more writers, John T. Neville and Prescott Chaplin, to help him expand the script to 156 pages. This version of the script was sent to the censor board but was quickly rejected due to numerous issues that were all highlighted in a 6-page memo that criticized the script's jocular references to drinking and liquor, vulgar and suggestive scenes of dialogue, with strong objections to bananas and pineapples. Eventually, a heavily edited script was approved by the production code, but Fields regarded it as the worst script he had ever read and was ready to quit the project. However, Eddie Klein managed to dissuade him, suggesting they would secretly shoot Fields' version of the film anyway. And they did. At this point, it was evident that Fields recognized his spotlight in the industry was beginning to dim, and he was determined to exit defiantly. With a big screw you to the studio system, The Great Man, ultimately titled Never Give a Sucker an Even Break, holds nothing back in its satirical depiction of Hollywood. The film begins with a blatant and self-deprecating reference to Fields and Klein's previous entry, The Bank Dick.
Raspberries. 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 Raspberries.
W.C. Fields takes on the challenging role of W.C. Fields, and Never Give a Sucker an Even Break is immediately and unmistakably a W.C. Fields movie, complete with physical comedy,
All 5 of them hit it once.
and Fields' particular lingual musicality.
How'd you like to hide the egg and regurgitate a few saucers of mocha java.
The film unleashes on the lot of the fictitious esoteric studios where everything plays like a satirical jab at the studio system, as Fields unapologetically bites the hand that had been feeding him for years, humorously confronting the constant intervention that had so long been a source of irritation for him, whether broadly...
Just a minute, Mr. Fields. There's a limit to everything. This script is an insult to a man's intelligence, even mine.
Or at times a little more tactfully.
2 4-minute eggs in glass.
Cup.
Yes, cup. And some whole wheat...
White.
Some white bread, yes. And get away from there. And a cup of mocha java with cream.
Milk.
Milk, yes, that's fine.
Or even straight up directly.
I feel as though somebody stepped on my tongue with muddy feet. This scene's supposed to be in a saloon, but the censor cut it out. It'll play just well, isn't it? Come on, where's my drink?
Like many of Fields' projects, the narrative in Never Give a Sucker an Even Break maintains a very flexible structure largely designed to serve as diving boards for Fields' surreal scenarios, the central of which revolves around Fields pitching his preposterous script to an increasingly frazzled producer.
That's all. That's enough. That's too much. Airplanes with sunbecks. Russian villagers in the sky. Gorillas playing post office. Cows, sheep, goat milk.
That may seem a little out there, out of turn, but that's precisely the content of the off-the-wall script he reads. Fields appears to be enjoying his time on screen, fully aware he's getting away with more mayhem and quirk than he ever had before. The movie is undoubtedly a peculiar piece of work, and at times it can play like a compilation of W.C. Fields' greatest hits. His character, himself, is essentially a fusion of the characters he had played through his career so far. The endearingly bumbling family man and the con-man bachelor looking to get rich quickly. Throughout his filmography, we can see Fields had no issues with recycling material that worked, and viewers can certainly identify plenty of callbacks to similar gags from the catalog here. W.C. Fields is the main attraction, but he's backed by an exceptional ensemble that fully understands their post. While each has their moments to shine, they play well aware of their purpose to set the scene for Fields' great punchlines.
Oh.
Are you ass sick?
No, dear. Somebody put too many olives in my martinis last night.
Should I get you a bromo?
No, I couldn't stand the noise.
Fields had assembled a cast himself, entrusting roles to his comedy colleagues. Margaret Dumont as Mrs. Hemoglobin, Franklin Pangborn as the manic producer Mr. Pangborn, and perhaps most memorably, Jody Gilbert as the snarky waitress.
You know, there's something awfully big about you.
Thank you, dear, thank you, dear, thank you.
Your nose.
There's nothing awfully big about you, too.
Rising talent, Gloria Jean is Fields' affable niece. Only 14 years old at the time of filming, she's perhaps the only voice of reason in the movie, effectively serving as a surrogate for the audience. Just as she does, we can laugh at Uncle Bill's shenanigans with affection rather than scorn.
Don't you want to be smart?
No, I want to be like you.
As was common in comedies of the era, the film is weighed down by unnecessary musical numbers, surely included at the behest of studio heads aiming to appeal to a broader audience. Gloria Jean serves the songs well, but this wasn't that kind of picture, and Fields wouldn't take it lying down, cleverly commandeering said musical numbers with plenty of distracting humor, like goose-stepping German soldiers. The film culminates in a spectacular car chase sequence that is arguably one of the wildest car chases ever put to film. Coming off of The Bank Dick, which also featured a rowdy car chase finale, Fields and company aim to top that excitement with even more impressive action. This extended pursuit unfolds as Fields escorts a woman he believes to be in labor to a maternity ward, speeding by a wealth of various 1940s Los Angeles locales. This vast and curious sequence is one of the funniest car chases of all time, packed with an abundance of gags and incredible stunt work, all without a lick of CGI. This sequence would be heavily recycled just a few years later for the Abbott and Costello movie, In Society. Never Give a Sucker an Even Break had initially been scheduled for an optimal holiday release, but once the studio heads had a chance to view the film's initial cut, they opted to undermine the movie instead. With Abbott and Costello and Olsen and Johnson now fronting Universal's upcoming comedy slate, Universal determined this could and would be Field's last film with the studio. Significant portions of the movie were reshot, re-edited, and reorganized, all without Field's involvement, in an attempt to align it more closely to the zany style of the upcoming and anticipated adaptation of Hellzapoppin'. Universal would relegate the new cut of the film to a less prominent slot on the release schedule, while giving Hellzapoppin' a more amplified promotional campaign.
It's for you, Mrs. Pastrami.
Strong men faint. Some faint with their rights and some faint with their lefts.
Yes, I can't hear you. You'll have to talk louder.
He faints.
I'm talking as loud as I can.
Yeah.
Do I always have spaghetti for dinner?
Yeah.
Well, all right,
you
we'll
write
have
your
ravioli.
letter.
Of course I'll be home. What time is
put
it?
his hand
You ought to
in
know.
your
Yes.
lap.
I can't hear you. Goodbye.
Oh, goodbye.
Nevertheless, the film remains an absolute delight. It revels in its deliberate absurdity, embracing sheer silliness, frequently and even confidently racing beyond stupidity, being one of the crowning final entries of the wild, wacky, and wonderfully purposeless style of vaudeville comedy on the screen.
Suffering sciatica. Last time it was pink elephants.
The studio's meddling is apparent, raising questions about the necessity of their interventions in the first place. Is this film the best it could be, or were there untapped comedic moments left on the cutting room floor? Despite the occasional messiness, the film still manages to come together and find its charm. Never Give a Sucker an Even Break is an ironic and captivatingly surreal masterpiece from a comedy legend at the end of his career.
We're falling 2,000 feet.
It's all right, dear. Don't start worrying when we get down 1,999. The last foot that's dangerous.
Never Give a Sucker an Even Break would indeed mark Field's final starring role. For the following years, he made brief appearances in a handful of films in a cameo capacity.
Get in there and pick those oranges. Hold that potato masher.
Ain't he ugly? Who is he?
Who is he?
Yeah.
Who is he?
No, I asked you first.
Why, that's W.C. Fields.
No.
Yeah.
With declining health and a lifelong devotion to drinking undoubtedly catching up to him, W.C. Fields would pass away on Christmas Day, 1946.
Uncle Bill, are you all right?
I didn't have an accident. I've never gotten here.
My Uncle Bill. But I still love him.
The title, Never Give a Sucker an Even Break, draws its origins from lines featured in two previous Fields features.
I want to give you one little bit of fatherly advice.
Yes, Pop?
Never give a sucker an even break.
As my dear old grandfather Lickbox said, just before they sprung the trap, he said, you can't cheat an honest man. Never give a sucker an even break or smarten up a chump.
Its essential meaning can be boiled down to this: always exploit an idiot. The sentiment acts as a simple embodiment of W.C. Fields and his brand of comedy. The film as well stands as a symbolic sign-off, with Fields making the most of the fools he knew on and off the screen. His cynical, no-holds-barred critique of the studio system hilariously manifests his tendency to ridicule the naive within the Hollywood establishment, even as they sign some of the most substantial paychecks of his career.
Do you actually think I'm a dope? Now, don't you answer that.
Let's get on with it anyway.
The film serves best as a conclusion to the legacy of W.C. Fields rather than an introduction, appreciated better within the broader context and evolution of his work. While to some it may not rank as the finest in his catalog, it certainly stands out for its absurdity and audacity. To embark from his early stages, pulling teeth and slick hat tricks, to the passively witty souse plummeting from the sky, is an entertaining journey worth taking. W.C. Fields is a comedy colossus, both in stature and in symbol, and he is aptly primed to be rediscovered and celebrated once again.
You know, Uncle Bill, I've been thinking, why didn't you ever marry?
I was in love with a beautiful blonde once, dear. She drove me to drink. That's the one thing I'm indebted to her for.
This is Levity Light Classics.